You wouldn't believe it. The Discovery failed its warrant of fitness. No plate light. Can probably replace a bulb. Fluid leak. Left rear wheel. And yes, I can confirm after climbing in behind here that there is some greasy seepage going on from the hub. And as you can see, my driveway is a hill, and I can't really take wheels off without inadvertently becoming a human wheel chock. So I have to scale this stone wall to get to my workshop. Now, I've done quite a bit of terraforming since you last saw this. This edge is considerably lower than it used to be. The left-hand side is basically level. I think the Discovery could probably drive straight up here. However, this rock sticking up in the middle is a bit of a diff destroyer. So I think it's safest to still build a ramp. Looks perfect. That I completely missed. Okay. Looks like we'll just drive straight up. We're not hitting anything yet. So, this is the work environment, the dark, cold side of the house. I can't believe it's been a whole year since I didn't sweep up leaves last year. I'll see if we can get away with the little jack today. Save dragging the big one out. Is the handbrake? Oh yes, it's got that handbrake, hasn't it? Should have done this on the ground. Oh, who did that one? Oh, god damn it. Bloody tyre guys with their rattle guns. Okay, what have we got? Well, I can see that DIY Dave has been in here. A bit of RTV, never hurt anyone. And somebody's used plenty of anti-seize, but or maybe they have put it on the flange. They've certainly smeared it all around here, which doesn't come into contact with anything, but that's okay. This is a little greasy, but the reason it failed its inspection, I'm sure, is because the brake disc itself is a little greasy. And I think that must be coming from, I can't see anything on the front, so it must be coming from the back. Didn't exactly crack. Sorry, I'm trying to avoid getting in the way of the camera. These screws do not feel good. Like they have some kind of locking mechanism on them or something. This has a hard line attached to it, so it's a little tricky to get out of the way without wrecking everything. I think that'll be fine. I've strung it up between the spring and there's a hole in the underside of the floor over here. Try not to bend the brake line too much. All right, let's get into the meat of it. Oh, this smells bad. Oh, I've opened the gates of hell. Cat anus hell. God, everything's greasy. I'll go get some gloves. It's lucky everybody glues these things together so the next guy can't get them off. Oh, this stinks. Oh, we must be working on the long side. You can see quite a bit of silicon floating around in here. I don't personally use RTV as a gasket dresser for this reason, but I guess it's a bit of a backyard tradition. The lock nut's probably been reused more than once by the look of it. Or not, I'm not sure. Someone used an axe to fold it over anyway. Alright, we don't need to reuse this. And I didn't actually check. Hopefully the nuts are the same size as on a series vehicle. Yeah. These are garbage, by the way, but yeah, one day I'll get around to buying a proper socket. Lock washer, and then the inner nut. We should be able to pull this whole assembly off with the bearings and everything together. And I've got a plastic container right next to me ready for it. Oh, but it doesn't fit. I'm pretty sure this is where our leak will be coming from. This is where the leak always comes from. This is exactly the same setup as on a Series 3. I don't think the parts are interchangeable because the locking mechanism is different, but it's all otherwise the same. This raised edge is where an oil seal runs, just in here. This is the oil seal that we'll be replacing. Hopefully that fixes the leak. It should do because this oil seal is on backwards. Hopefully we don't have to replace this. It feels fine. I'm sure these are available, so it wouldn't be a big deal, but I don't have one right now, so I would have to wait for it. We're not going to stop here though. Now on a series Land Rover, this hole, which is open through into the center of the diff, the oil migrates through here into the wheel bearings, which is fine. Oil's good for bearings too. I believe in this case, there's an oil seal inside here as well that keeps the axle oil separate from the wheel bearing grease. This is where the oil seal runs. So on a series axle, you don't have this. And the oil can just move straight through here. This end is different too. And you can see in the pot, there's quite a bit of oil. So presumably it has been leaking past that seal. Oh, there's the oil seal. Yeah, I'm guessing it wasn't doing very much. That's supposed to be in here. This way round. I don't know if this was in the right way or backwards because it was just sitting there, doing nothing. The seal is new too, in case you're wondering. Newish. It's nice and pliable, and I think Land Rover were probably still using seals that had a metal outer casing on them at this point. Here's the mark on the axle where it was rubbing. Probably like this. It's lucky it didn't find its way through to where all the gears are in the diff. Okay, well, I'm going to give everything a clean. I'm tempted to take that brake backing plate off as well. Give it a little tss. I'll be back shortly when everything's less oily. Alright, here's everything on the bench cleaned up. We'll move this big lump to the side for now and start with this. Ignore everything over here, that's just scrap metal. You might see that later. Probably not. Okay, so I ordered the seals and gaskets from Mamaku. There is some variation depending on the model year, but these should be correct, unless someone has changed stuff on my vehicle. The seals are Cortico. They make a lot of the Land Rover specific seals. You can of course buy ultra cheap unbranded seals through Britpart or Bearmark or whoever, but I just buy the more expensive ones. Doing the job twice is worse than spending $10 extra. A couple of the gaskets are for the other Land Rover. a replacement lock washer, and these are the two gaskets. This is the main hub oil seal, and it is very typical for this seal to leak as they get old and wear out, or if someone puts it on backwards. And that must have happened more than a few times because they actually tell you on the oil seal which way to put it. Now this surface here is what the oil seal runs on, and very commonly this will have a deep groove worn into it. You can replace just the steel ring that the seal runs against. It's a little involved though. You have to drill almost through the ring and then split it with a chisel, and then heat the new one up and drive it onto the stub axle, and they sometimes leak afterwards despite your best efforts. I'm just going to run with this one. I can see a few marks in it, but I think it'll be okay. So I would suggest, if you're not confident about doing all of that, you can just buy the whole stub axle ready to go for about £35. And this is the smaller oil seal that separates the axle oil from the wheel bearing. The metal shield is there to stop the half shaft wrecking the oil seal when you slide it in. And it did throw me for a second because I can't say I've seen a seal like this before. It looks a bit like the old metal encased seals, but the other way around. Anyway, this seal stops axle oil getting into the bearings, so the back of the seal faces the centre of the axle. Now, I'm applying non-hardening compound to the outside of where the oil seal sits. You don't need to do this with a modern rubber-encased seal like this one. I do it anyway because, well, I'm not charging anybody for my time, and it's cheap insurance, right? And there you can see it installed. The seal is pretty easy because it sits inside a recess with a hard bottom, so you just push it all the way in. And these Cortico seals do come with grease already applied to the lip, but I smeared a bunch more on, just for good measure. Before I reinstall the stub axle, I'm going to run a tap through the bolt holes, just because somebody used all the thread lock, and so the threads are completely full of dry Loctite. At least they used blue and not red. I'm putting sealant on the gasket surface because I'm a chicken. This is Permatex number 1. I normally use number 2, which is slow setting, but I split a hole in this tube so I may as well use it. Number 3 is probably what you want, but I don't have any. This'll work fine. So I'll put that over there, why not? Not completely sure what the purpose of this piece is. The last guy used all of the Loctite. We don't need anywhere near as much. And these are torqued to 48 foot-pound. And I'll give the gasket and compound a few minutes to squeeze and then come back and recheck them. And I'm sure if you follow any car-related channels, you've seen this process before. And now, the hub. So this is still a bit filthy and gross, but that's okay. I might just run a file across this surface. Seems like a few people have had a bit of a go at it. Yeah, big high spots. So now, the first bearing goes in, because we can't install this after the oil seal. Put a little more grease down in there. And now try to get the grease off this edge, because that's where the oil seal is going. And I would like to use some compound if possible. There's a little nick on the inside of here, so I definitely want to be using compound. All right, where did my lid go? I don't really have a plan for getting this in yet. Hopefully it goes in easy. Not like that. No, no, back out. I'll just go grab the old seal. Hopefully use this. Yeah, it's going to fit perfect. So we'll be able to use this and not damage the original. Sorry, not damage the one we need. Now, it says on here, install to depth of 4 millimeters. So I assume that's 4 millimeters from this surface to the main part of the seal, not this top lip. Could be wrong, but that's what we're doing. We're about right over the back here. A little bit more on this side. Okay, I think that's pretty good. We'll find out if it leaks or not. And again, plenty of grease. The edge that sticks up on the outside of the seal runs against the face of the stub axle, not to keep oil in, but to stop dust coming into contact with the lip of the oil seal. So I'm making sure that has grease on it, because otherwise it will run dry. I have no idea how much grease you're supposed to put in a wheel bearing. You don't want the hub to be solid full of grease. That'll probably get really hot and leak everywhere. I fill these up so the grease is about level with the edge of the bearing races. I don't know, probably a bit more than 1/4 inch thick all round. And then fill the tops of the bearings. And the trick here is to carry everything together without letting the bearings fall into a pile of sandy grit. I have to be very careful of the oil seal here. You have to hold the weight of the hub so that the seal doesn't drag on the stub axle, especially the threads. I forgot to bring the nut. You're gonna sit there. There we go. Okay. Actually, I'm just going to double check we didn't damage the seal then. No, it looks good. Okay. Now, the wheel bearings. So first, make sure it turns. Yep. Give this a little bit of a wrench, because you need to make sure that the bearings are seated properly. See, that's as far as it wants to go, which is probably too tight. Now back off. Now that's loose. So basically you need to tighten this to make sure you've taken all of the play out of the bearings, and then back it off, and then retighten it gently until it feels about right. I don't really have a good way of describing how to do this by feel, but I assume that 90% of old Land Rover wheel bearings are tightened without checking the end float or anything like that. I'm going to use an indicator because I have one, and this is the method set out in the service manual. So what we're aiming for is anything between 1/2 thousandths to 4/1000ths of an inch. And we got nothing. How about now? Can you guys still see that? Probably not. You might not be able to see that, but it's moving about 1 thou. I might just back it off a tiny bit more. Okay. That's too much. That's moving a little over 4. It's a little more tricky on these than the series vehicles because that rubber seal at the back is actually pressing against the stub axle. So you kind of have to compress that at the same time, but that's a little loose. A little more. I'm aiming for about 2. I know from experience when you put the lock nut over the top, it's going to tighten it a little bit more. And now the lock washer, and you can see how this has this cutout shape which matches the stub axle. That's important because it's going to stop this nut turning the inside nut. So I kind of try and take up the slack a little bit, although this one's pretty tight. Okay, now recheck. Yeah, see, it's gone to nothing. So we had 2000s, put the washer and the lock nut on, and now we have none. So we need to loosen it off a little bit more to allow for that tightening. That's a solid 4 this time. Let's see how that goes. Also, when you do this, take note of where your inside nut is. It's going to help when you need to bend over the tab because you can't see it. So we're basically straight up and down. Tiny bit of movement. So we need to start even looser than 4. I think 5 is going to be the magic ticket. Okay, so now with the lock nut done up, we have a solid 1 thou of movement, which is good. That means the bearings aren't tight, but it's not excessive. Good, okay. I'm using a cold chisel to fold the washer down. This is a very blunt chisel, in fact completely unusable as a chisel. You don't want to be splitting the washer or carving off burrs. Just a nice even fold. Same with the upwards fold. I find it best to start with a wide screwdriver and then tap it flat with a blunt chisel or punch or whatever. So now I need to very, very carefully install the half shaft without damaging that oil seal. Easy. Easy. Okay, we're through the oil seal. I'm just trying to take the weight of it as much as I can. There it goes. All right, let's go get some screws. That was plenty. Now again, I'll give that a minute to squeeze down and then recheck it. Not too long because we don't want the Loctite to go off. Okay, good. Hopefully that doesn't leak. That's it. All done. These stainless steel covers are cool. Bring those back. almost forgot. Better fix this. I think this is the wrong size anyway. Smaller than the new bulbs. It doesn't appear to be blown though. We'll see. Just put a smidge of silicone grease on these terminals because they were looking a little corroded. Okay, how did we do? Let's see. Oh yeah. Alright, wish me luck. Hopefully the hub stays dry, at least until I get to the mechanics. Ah, great. Flat battery. What are the chances?
And with that, I set off for the recheck. And of course they barely looked at it and just stuck the sticker on. Because old mechanics like Land Rovers. So that's me sorted for another 6 months. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.